Oh, hey, now that's pretty spooky. Hello, friends, and welcome back to ReddX. Today I have an upload from my other channel, my creepypasta channel, Dayton Dies. It is Neckbeard related, but things are sort of up in the air for me at the moment, so this is the best I got. Probably get another compilation tomorrow. We will get back on the horse eventually. I'd also like to mention that we are going to be doing Jackbox games in the private Discord VC that is for Patreon channel members, server boosters, and collaborators. So if you got one of those roles in the Discord and you want to come on through, I'd appreciate it. With all that said, I'm just gonna roll this thing as is, and I hope you will enjoy. Hello, friends, and welcome back to Dayton Dies. I am not dead quite yet, and neither are you, which is a very good thing. Let's try to keep that streak alive, as it were. Milady, written by user Erucius, narrated by Brandon Dayton. I was not at fault here, and I don't understand why the universe has decided that I should suffer. As I lay here and listen to his throaty, phlegm-filled breathing, I consider again the idea that ending it might be for the best. It wasn't my fault what happened to him. He should have just left me alone. Now, I'm the one who must suffer his company, maybe for the rest of my life. The day started with the hard slap of rocks against my window, and I loosed a loud sigh as I thrust the covers away from me. Every morning. Every goddamn morning. I hadn't had to buy an alarm clock since moving in, so I suppose there was that. As another handful of stone cascaded against the window, I swung angrily from my bed and shifted the curtains open. I did not open the window right away. You only make that mistake once. The pudgy man-child on the sidewalk had just reared back to throw another handful of stones when he saw me in the window and smiled happily. That smile showed me every inch of his yellow teeth, his spotted gums, and the spit that covered his half-rotten teeth in a sheen of translucence. He was dressed in his usual attire, and I imagine that I could smell him even from 2 floors up. He wore ratty Chuck Taylor sneakers, cargo shorts in February that likely hadn't been washed since his mother bought them from JCPenney, a ratty black trench coat that covered his grease-stained t-shirt, depicting a busty anime girl who seemed overjoyed to be stretched across his own voluminous C-cup breasts, a wispy beard that somehow made his face look even dirtier, and of course, the battered black fedora that capped it all. This is what he had worn, or some iteration of it, every day since we had first met 2 long years ago. And I shook my head as he waved a pudgy hand at me. "Hey, good morning, my lady." He knew my name. I had told it to him many times, but he always insisted on calling me Milady. "Kenneth, what the hell do you want?" I asked, grumpy about being woken up and sour about Kenneth being the first person that I saw 9 mornings out of 10. "Oh, well, I just thought that since we both work today, I would offer to walk you. We're on the same shift again, so it just seemed like you might appreciate the company." I sighed. I would have appreciated company. Any company but Kenneth's. I'm gonna be a minute, Kenneth. A long minute, so just feel free to go on ahead without me. I can wait for you. I'll be here when you're done getting ready. Unless you rather I waited inside." He snorted through a partially clogged nose. I saw the gleam that came into his piggy little eyes and shuddered. "I'd rather you went on without me, Kenneth, but since there's nothing I can do to stop you from waiting, I suppose you can wait on the front porch." I closed the window then, blocking him out, and pulling the curtains closed, and got ready for work. Every day. Every goddamn day. I'd been living in this townhouse for the last 2 years, and I should have known that the rent was too good to be true. The lady who showed me the house was very complimentary about the neighborhood. She talked about the convenient garbage pickup, and the cost-effective water measures that she had installed, the proximity to restaurants and downtown, and all at a cost that was nearly half of all the other rentals in the area. I'd been attending college at the time, the college being about 3 blocks from my apartment, and it sounded like a real sweetheart deal. I was moving my stuff in the first time that I met Kenneth. I say met, but really I smelled him before I saw him. Have you ever been next to somebody on a subway who just maybe doesn't shower regularly? The kind of person who covers it up with body sprays instead of just, washing their clothes and wearing deodorant. The kind of person that you really don't want to stand too close to because their clothes look like they might get grease on yours if they brushed up against you. That was what I was assaulted by, as this mountain of a man came wandering over to introduce himself. He was dressed in cargo shorts and a t-shirt that day as well, the July heat too much for even his trench coat to handle, with a pair of sandals that put his yellow toenails on full display. I was carrying a box of books inside when I heard him greet me by name, and that should have been my first indication that something was afoot.
Welcome to the neighborhood,
he said, his voice thick and phlegmy.
I'm Kenneth. My mom said we had a new tenant, but she failed to mention how beautiful she was. Would you like some help?
I had thanked him, but Kenneth's idea of helping seemed to entail watching me move boxes while he talked my ear off about video games, anime, and fantasy roleplay. He was aghast that a girl as worldly as me, whatever that was supposed to mean, had never seen an anime. I admitted that I had watched some Sailor Moon when I was in elementary school, mostly because it was on when I got home. He scoffed at that, however, and waved a pudgy hand at the mention of what he called girly anime. The fact that I didn't play D&D or video games was also a subject that Kenneth wished to remedy. Thankfully, I had moved all my stuff in by the time he started talking about the third or fourth game franchise of which he was a super fan, and I thanked him for his, help. I'm gonna go inside to unpack now, so I'll see ya.
I can help you unpack if you'd like.
I'd been standing in the doorway when he said it. The front door, the only thing that lay between him and me. The look that crossed his face when he offered to help me unpack was a look akin to a cat left to guard a mouse. I could just picture this grubby man-child pawing through my clothes, finding some reason to stumble across my underwear, pressing my shirts up to his pug nose, and I had to stifle a full-body shudder. On second thought, I'm pretty tired, Kenneth. I think I'm gonna rest and just unpack tomorrow. Have a good night. He started to protest, but I closed the door on him and locked the deadbolt. My door has 3 locks, a twist lock, the deadbolt, and the top chain. I engaged all of them before turning around to make something to eat. I'd already decided that I would unpack before going to bed today, leaving Kenneth with no excuse to go upstairs and touch any of my things. His annoyance had become creepy pretty quickly, and I did not want him hanging around any more than I could help. I had just gotten to the entryway to the small kitchen when I heard an unsettling noise from the front door. I turned and found the doorknob twisting a little, as whoever was on the other side tried to quietly open my door. I thought about seeing who it was, but my fear had a firm grip on me. Home is where you're supposed to feel safest, and that turning knob negated any safeness that I might have felt. I couldn't prove that it was Kenneth, but I also couldn't prove that it wasn't. The turning stopped after a few seconds, and I made a mental note to get a chain for the back door as well. The first 6 months were probably the least eventful. I enjoyed my newfound freedom of having my own space, but I definitely noticed some strangeness in the house. I would come home to find things moved or find things missing, and I suspected that Kenneth had been in while I was gone. More than once, I would catch a whiff of Axe body spray upstairs, a smudge on something that looked a lot like a fingerprint, or just something moved that shouldn't be moved. Kenneth came over to hang out a whole lot, and I quickly got tired of having him around. He was always overly friendly, almost fawningly so, and I began to suspect that he had a crush on me. He brought over anime or his Xbox, and I spent many evenings reading subtitles or watching him finish some level on some game. He was annoying, but I felt that he was ultimately pretty harmless, and the movies he brought over were sometimes kinda cool. He seemed harmless, if not a little clingy. Anytime I would start to feel the least bit comfortable around him, though, I remembered that look on my doorstep, and I began to rethink. I gave his mother a key the first time that I changed the locks, telling her that I suspected an old tenant was using a key and coming inside. After I found the chain off the back door, something I was zealous about keeping chained up at all times, I didn't bother giving her keys after that. And after that, the intrusions did stop. And then, COVID happened. My city did the lockdown thing, and suddenly all classes were online, all functions were canceled, and I was spending more time than usual inside of my apartment. During this time, unfortunately, my grades began to suffer. Some people can absolutely take classes online and do fine, but I'm not one of those people, as I came to find out. I was one of those popular girls in high school who liked to bask in the place's environment and social structure. Suddenly, having professors that I couldn't talk to face was hurting my grades. Suddenly, not having peers to talk to review notes with, and to bounce ideas off of was hurting me. And as my grades suffered, the school threatened to take away my grant. The grant was how I paid for housing, so I doubled down and tried to bring my grades back up. I studied long hours, watched tutorials on YouTube, and read anything I could find on the subject matter, but nothing seemed to help. Kenneth did not help with this particular problem either, of course. Despite the orders to wear masks and social distance, Kenneth was always trying to come over and hang out like he used to. He wasn't in school, all his friends were already online, and neither he nor his mother thought that this was more than just a flu. I don't know how many times I would look through the peephole and find him maskless on my front porch with an anime box set of something, or his Xbox, wanting me to hang out. I tried to be nice to him, but as my grades suffered, so did my mental health, and I started ignoring him after a while. Then, after a horrible semester, my grant was cut, and I was left waiting a year to reapply. That's how we come to our current predicament, me working and Kenneth being paid to hang out with me. I came out to the front door 45 minutes later to find him sitting on my porch swing, his phone in his hand, and his rocking making the chains grind together. "Is this really what you're wearing to work?" I asked, locking both locks and turning to go.
It's not like they care,
he said with a shrug.
It's Walmart. As long as we show up, they don't care what we have on.
He had a point, but I still tried to tune him out as we walked to work together. I'd started working at Walmart after my savings started to dwindle. My landlord, Kenneth's mother, cut my rent a little because of all this pandemic nonsense, she would say with a scoff. However, it still only floated me about another month before I needed to get a job. Walmart was hiring, and they just needed warm bodies. Kenneth didn't work there right away, but after hearing that I had started working there, he was soon applying for a job as well. Charles, one of the assistant managers, was a gaming buddy, and I assumed the source of my constant stock shifts with Kenneth. It was a real toss-up which one of them I hated more these days. Kenneth was unnaturally quiet on the way to work today. His face had that look that let me know that he was thinking about something very hard, and I feared that he would ask me out yet again. He had asked me out about once a month since I moved in, and I had just started ignoring him, despite his mother's pressure. I got the feeling that she was getting worried about him not leaving the nest, and she hoped that a nice girlfriend would be enough of a mother stand-in to help get him out of her basement and into mine. Sorry, Mama Kenneth, but that dog wasn't hunting in these woods. She could find some other girl to pawn her precious little angel off on.
So, m'lady,
he said, finally finding his courage,
you may have noticed that Valentine's Day is tomorrow.
It had somehow escaped me after unloading a metric ton of Valentine's Day candy and toys over the past month, Kenneth, but yeah, thanks for bringing that to my attention, I said, acid dripping as the February air nipped at my nose.
Well, I was just wondering if you'd like to be my Valentine this year and go on a date with me tomorrow.
I sighed. No, Kenneth, for the 1000th time, no. Kenneth's face got that look about it that small children get when you tell them no.
But why? Don't tell me you already have a date.
Nope, sure don't. I intend to stay in on Valentine's Day since I have the night off.
Well, that's fine. We don't have to go out anywhere. We could stay in and rent a movie and maybe cuddle on the couch and...
I rounded on him then, my frustration and lack of patience getting the better of me as I erupted liquid hate all over this yipping puppy of a man. No, Kenneth. I've told you 1,000 times, and the answer will always be no. I don't want to date you. I hardly want to be your friend on most days, and the thought of you sitting next to me on the couch gives me hives. Move on. Kenneth stood there, his face transitioning between barely contained tears and barely contained rage. His mouth seemed like it wanted to say something, but his brain seemed to be holding it at bay. He looked like he was trying to chew himself from the inside out, and the tears seemed to win out in the end. His eyes began to flood with impotent water, the flood falling onto his t-shirt as he turned and ran back towards home. He looked like one of those anime characters that he loved so much as he fled from his spurning, and I guessed later that this might have been his intention. I let him go, making sure he rounded the corner before turning and continuing heading off to work. I still had bills to pay, after all. I'd thought that maybe Kenneth would have learned a little something after my outburst, but yeah, he hadn't. I got home very late that night to find him sitting on my porch with a heart-shaped box of chocolates.
Milady,
he wheezed, rising ponderously.
You've returned home at long last.
The look on my face should have told him everything he needed to know about how glad I was to see him. I brushed snow off the shoulder of my jacket and wondered how long he had been sitting out here, waiting for me. It had been chilly when I'd gotten to work, but not really uncomfortably so. That had quickly changed over the last 8 hours, and all anyone at work could talk about was the freak blizzard that was rolling in tonight. The old-timers were saying that the Weather Channel called for 3 feet overnight, and it had already started powdering as I had left the store at 10. I'd walked back home with only the streetlights to keep me company, a welcome change from the usual yarking in my ear from Kenneth. Now, it seemed, I would have to get loud with him all over again. Yeah, you know why I had to stay so late? I asked, menacing towards him with my fists balled up. It was you. You didn't show up for work, so I had to do your job and my job tonight. I had to stock 2 departments in 8 hours, and when I couldn't get it done, I had to stay an extra 4 hours and finish your work. He backed away, holding up the box of chocolates like it was a shield, clearly not receiving the greeting that he had hoped for.
Yeah, I kinda had a little freak out when you said you wouldn't be my girlfriend, but I realized that once you had a chance to calm down, you'd come to your senses, and we could plan our date for tomorrow. Here, I got you some chocolates. It's kinda late to make a reservation for anywhere, but...
He stopped talking when I slapped the box out of his hand, the half-eaten box scattering across my porch. No, Kenneth, I will not date you. I will not walk to work with you. I'm through pretending to be your friend. Go away and leave me alone. Take a hint, you insufferable man-child. I don't like you, and I don't want to hang out with you. I walked to the door and keyed it open, blocking it so he couldn't follow me in. When I turned back to look at him, though, I was a little worried about doing this on the porch. Kenneth was breathing heavily, and I thought for a moment that he might be crying. The breathing was filled with rage, however, and I was suddenly very aware that I was a 5'2" female yelling at a man who was nearly 6 feet and weighed about twice what I did. I suddenly needed to get inside this house in very short order. I needed a door between Kenneth and I. I needed to call his mother, if not the police, and explain to her that her son was on the verge of a restraining order.
What the hell's wrong with you?
Kenneth bellowed, and I half closed the door as he turned to let his spittle of rage fly at me.
I'm nice to you. I try to be your friend. I bring you gifts. I do everything that a boyfriend does, and you still won't date me? That's not fair. You're supposed to love me. You're supposed to fall in love with me because I do all the things that girls like. I even went and bought the box set of Sailor Moon so we could watch it together, since I know you like that girly crap.
He took a step towards me, and I slammed the door in his face. I had just engaged the deadbolt when he twisted the knob and slammed his weight against the door, bellowing like a wounded animal. "Go home, Kenneth! Do not bother me anymore, or I will call the police." He banged on the door for a while longer, but I ignored him. When I had finished making myself a bowl of chili, I found that he had stopped pounding on the door. I ate my food, showered, got my clothes ready for tomorrow. On the off chance that we didn't get 3 feet of snow, I would need to go to work tomorrow and deal with Kenneth. He would likely be waiting for me, as always, smiling his butter-toothed smile and waiting like an excited puppy for me to come out and play. I was snug in my bed, preparing to sleep when I heard the music. The music was soft, romantic, and I thought for a moment that it might be something by John Legend. I could hear it coming from right below my window, and I flipped back the covers angrily as I went to have a look. Sure enough, it was Kenneth. He was parked in the snow, a large silver boombox in his hands. As he lifted it, bad 80s movie style, towards my window, we made eye contact. His eyes filled with earnest emotion, and mine filled with nothing but puppy-kicking rage. I opened the window, the chill scraping across me as I told him to go home.
"No,"
Kenneth said.
"not until you agree to a date with me."
"You're gonna freeze out there."
"Then let me in and keep me warm,"
he said, unable to keep that grin off of his face. I just closed the window on him. He'd get cold and go home, eventually. The music stopped about an hour later, and I guessed that the batteries had run dry after all that continuous playing. The following day, I woke up to a sea of white. The snow hadn't been 3 feet deep. The snow had been 5 feet deep, and it spilled over onto the porch when I opened my door that morning. The wind was made of razor blades, the power holding but flickering a little every now and then. I called work, and they said that they would be closed for the next few days. They told me to stay safe, and I decided to settle in for a few well-deserved days off. I had expected Kenneth to bother me since I was now trapped at home, but he never came around. I got to enjoy a nice breakfast and even watch some TV before I was reminded that Kenneth existed at all. The knock came as the laugh track played on my 3rd episode of Friends, and I sighed and tied my bathrobe so as not to give him any ideas. He would want to come in, pretending like we'd never even had a fight yesterday, and I would likely have to yell at him once more. I was surprised to see Kenneth's mom, Janet, and not her portly man-child when I opened the door. "Hey there," she said, shivering on my porch as she pulled her scarf around her mouth. "I was just wondering if Kenny was over here." Janet is, quite frankly, the sweetest woman that I have ever met. In the 2 years that I've been here, she has tirelessly fixed anything wrong in the townhouse, brought over food for things like 4th of July or Thanksgiving, and even apologized for Kenneth on more than one occasion. She was like Cartman's mom from South Park. She was a lovely woman, and while aware that her son was a nightmare, there was very little that she could do besides love him. "Not since last night, ma'am." "Oh dear, well, I do hope he's okay. He said you two had a little fight yesterday, and he was coming over to try and make up." I gritted my teeth hard enough to hear them creak, but I held in the rage that I was feeling, so I didn't cook this lovely, oblivious lady alive. He did, but he left since I was tired from working all day. "Well, if you see him, tell him I was worried, okay?" As she left, I saw that someone had shoveled the sidewalks. She'd made a little path to my door. That was nice of them, but it seemed like I really didn't have anywhere to go. The city was buried under snow, and it was basically shut down. It appeared I could be inside for a while, and I decided to just settle in and enjoy my time off. The weirdness didn't start until almost sundown. I was making dinner when I noticed a smell hanging around the apartment. I looked around, wondering if I'd maybe forgotten to take the trash out. It was like a wet smell, with an underlying odor of cologne. It was like someone had tried to cover a mess with deodorizer, and the longer I stood cooking at the stove, the more my head began to ache. The longer I stayed in the miasma, the worse the smell got. and the stir fry that I was making started to swim a little as I cooked it. I ended up eating it a little underdone as I fled the kitchen for the living room. As the swinging door opened, I stopped and basted in the swampy tangle of smells from the living room and the kitchen. If the kitchen smelled like funk, the living room smelled like the inverse. Someone had been in my house. Of that, I had no doubt. The smell of spray cologne was strong in here, like a pungent wall that surrounded the couch. And as I sat, I could feel something flaking beneath me. It was like sitting in a seat behind a small child. And as I looked, I could see chip crumbs sticking to my pajama pants. They were orange and smelled strongly of Doritos. I set my bowl down as I stood and walked through the house. I could see smudges around the room, especially on my figurines and some of my pictures. Someone with large, greasy fingers had touched my things, and when I moved past the end table near the door, I took up the keychain with my mace on it. The doors were deadbolted, and though I don't know how Kenneth had gotten into my house, I was certain that he was the source of all of this. If he thought he could hang out in my house and violate my privacy just to get his rocks off, well, he had another thing coming. My food was cold by the time I got done triple checking every room in my apartment. There was nowhere that he could stay hidden from me, not someone his size, and after spraying some Febreze around, I took my food up to my room and just ate it cold. I felt uncomfortable in the open down there, and as the snow blew and the wind howled, I sat on my bed and listened. At some point, I fell asleep, curling up in my bed as I listened to the silent house around me. The lights were off in my room when I came to, and the curtains were thrown open to reveal a crystalline moon peeking in. The room was as quiet as the house, but I was aware of a heavy, wet sound as I came awake. It sounded like a dog, one that had been left out in the heat, and I scanned around to find the source of that heavy breathing. My eyes cast about, looking for the noise, and finally settled on a large black spot in the corner of the room. The darkness there was deep, the pitted murk blighted by a pair of small ovals that seemed to reflect the moonlight. The breathing was coming from there, and as it got heavier, the darkness seemed to shift unnervingly, like someone lurking in the gloom, trying not to be noticed.
"Milady,"
someone almost whispered, and I was up and across the room in a matter of seconds. I snapped the lights on, hands reaching for anything that I could find to defend myself with. I expected to see him much too close as the lights came on. I expected him to bury me under his weight, pushing me down, feeling his hands on me as he tried to kiss me, to touch me. I gripped the ceramic vase as the lights came on, preparing to swing it and shatter it against his head as he... But there was nothing. The lights came on and revealed nothing but an empty room with an anxious girl looking crazily around for an attacker who clearly wasn't there. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat up and argued with myself until the sun came up. I knew what I had seen. I had seen Kenneth in the corner, heard that same deep, watery breathing as I had heard 1,000 times, but I couldn't have seen him. Kenneth was a large and stocky fellow. There was no way that he could have gotten away in a split second between the lights being off and the lights being on. This wasn't someone who could squeeze under my bed in a split second or slip into my closet without notice. Kenneth often got winded on the walk to work, and the idea that he could quickly get out of my sight was laughable at best. Still, he had been there. The whole next day, I saw signs of someone having been in my house. It started as I finally got up for the day. As I came downstairs, I smelled something getting ready to burn in the kitchen. I pulled my robe around myself and quickly pushed into the cloud of smoke that awaited me. One of my good pans was on the stove, smoke billowing up. I turned the stove off, jerking my hand away as I grabbed the handle of the pan. It was broiling. The burner turned all the way up, and I grabbed an oven mitt as I took the pan off the stove. It wasn't until I put it in the sink that I saw a single blackened pancake at the bottom. A heart-shaped pancake. I was scraping the grit from the bottom of the pan when I suddenly heard an all-too-familiar theme song from the living room. The TV had been off when I got up. The lights dimmed to a low glow. I could hear the TV blaring from under the swinging door, and the pulse of bright lights clicked up to max on the switch. I pushed in, expecting to find Kenneth parked on my couch waiting for me, with his big serial killer grin and his excuses of how,
the door had been open, so he just come in.
But there was no one in the living room when I came through that door. There was, however, an indent on my couch, roughly the size of a large someone's backside. I searched the apartment again, already knowing what I would find, but needing the reassurance that I would find it, and there was no one. Just me, alone, in my apartment. I turned off the TV and cleaned up the mess, waiting until 9 before calling my landlord, wanting to hear her tell me that he had come home. I wanted her to answer and hear Kenneth in the background as he loudly whined for food or money or something. I wanted the confirmation that he was home, but I also feared it because if he was at home, then what the hell was going on here? She answered on the 4th ring. Hello, hello? Did you find him? Please say you found my baby. I sighed. My hopes were shattered. No, ma'am, I was just calling to see if he had turned up. I could hear her sob before telling me that no one had seen him and how worried she was about him and to please call if I had heard anything. I got dressed and decided to sit on the porch for a while, the house suddenly feeling much too small for me. I thought I had heard some rustling as I slid out of my pajamas and into some real clothes, but I did my best to ignore it as I made some tea and stepped out into the frigid air. The smoke from my tea plumed up as I sat on the swing that Kenneth had occupied yesterday, letting the cold air clear my head as I tried to read the book that I had brought with me. The longer I sat, my eyes roving over the winter wonderland in my own yard, the harder it became to maintain my anxiety. I was making too much out of this. Surely I had been imagining things, or a power surge caused by the weather had turned my TV on, or I'd been sleepwalking or something. The more I let the cold wash over me, the more I assured myself that I was just being silly. As noon came and went, the cold beginning to abate and the snow starting to soften, I went back inside. My stomach was growling for some lunch, but the icy chill from outside made me long for a shower first. I had all but forgotten about my trepidation and anxiety and simply wanted to be warm and snuggly as I enjoyed the rest of my afternoon. I would have a shower, put on some nice pajamas, make the stew that I had set out ingredients for in the fridge, and then head to bed for a nice evening spent at rest. As the warm water cascaded over my skin, I felt the cold dissipate, and the leftover anxiety just melted away. The shower had always been my safe place, my relaxation zone, and standing beneath the warm deluge made me feel a sense of peace that I had been missing before communion with nature. I washed my hair, lathered myself up, and just stood under the water as it took the soap and my worries right down the drain. At least it did, before I felt someone touch my hair. I have long, straight blonde hair, the kind that falls to about the small of my back and must be meticulously maintained so it doesn't look trashy. If I'm sitting on the couch and watching TV, there's probably a brush in my hand, and my hair is often flipped over my shoulder. I've always been sensitive about my hair, and I don't let people touch it very often. So when someone suddenly ran their fingers through that long blonde mass of wet hair, my eyes snapped open, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. I had felt the slight tug as 2 or 3 thick fingers slid down and parted the wet locks. I slipped as I stumbled forward, catching myself on the wall before I fell and hurt myself. Through my soupy curtain of foam, I looked around for the source of the touch, expecting to see him. I expected to see a bulbous shape leering at me from behind the curtain, but as I wiped the stinging muck out of my eyes, I was greeted with an empty bathroom. I came shakily out of the shower, hand trembling as I reached for my towel. I was shaken badly. I knew what I had felt. Enough men had tried to touch my hair for me to know what that felt like, and I couldn't trick myself into believing that I had just been imagining things. As I slid back into my clothes, the fog still thick around me, I was met with something even less easy to overlook. Written in the steam on the mirror, the lines reflecting my own horrified face back at me, was the word
"Milady."
I ran, half dressed from the bathroom, and slipped on the surprise waiting for me in the hall. I went down hard on my backside, yelping as I bruised my tailbone. The floor was covered with something that my wet feet found slippery, and now that I was on eye level with the floor, I could see them. They had been artfully scattered, leading towards my door in a line of red blotches. The rose petals would have been romantic on any other occasion. At the moment, they left me breathless as I leaned against the wall, watching my door slowly creak open. Behind it, the lights in my room dimmed, and I could see a thick, softly shadowed form, his eyes gleaming as his tongue slid over his thick porcine lips. I vaguely remember tripping down half the stairs, bruising my legs as I ran for the door. I remember grabbing my phone from the end table by the door, the charger coming free as I ran onto the porch. I remember talking to the operator, my teeth chattering as I shivered on the porch. My hands and feet were numb, my hair getting stiff from the cold, when the lights lit my icy yard. The sun had started to melt the snow, even as it set behind the nearby houses. The light on the snow looked odd, almost ethereal as they approached. I was thankful when someone threw a blanket over me, and one of the officers stayed to take my statement as the others searched the house. As I told him what had happened, I heard the snow crunch as my landlady came over to see what all the fuss was about. The police came from inside a moment later, shaking their heads and telling me they hadn't found anything. "Someone was definitely in there, though. There are rose petals all over your bed, and a box of chocolates sitting in the center. Someone had planned quite a romantic surprise for you, though I'm guessing that feeling wasn't shared." I shook my head and started to tell him about Kenneth's ambush on my porch the night before, but that was when I saw him again. The snow had melted some, and I could see him hunched by the fence line. He was staying still, trying not to be noticed, but I saw him. His ridiculous black trench coat was a dead giveaway, and I screamed as I pointed at him, his mother looking over my shoulder, pushing me aside as she ran towards her son. I grabbed the rail as I watched her go, the cops chasing after her, wondering, why didn't he move? The jig was up. We could see him. Why was he just sitting there? When his mother started screaming and the police officers started calling for an ambulance, I knew something was wrong. That was 2 days ago. He was dead, of course. He had frozen to death, waiting for me to invite him inside. They found the boombox sitting at his feet, frozen to the ground. His coat had been frozen to the back of the fence, and he had simply gone to sleep and never woken up. His mother, of course, was quick to blame me. Why hadn't I let him inside? Why hadn't I called her? And on until the police had finally taken her away. I had taken a few things and gone to stay at a hotel for the night off. I just couldn't stay in that house knowing that there was a dead body down in my yard. I thought, at the time, that that would be the end of it. They would just take the body away and the weirdness would end. Even if his spirit was somehow attached to my apartment, I would just move. His mother wouldn't want me living there anyway, not after I had led to the death of her son. I would just take my things and go elsewhere. When I woke up this morning to find the words "Milady" written on the bathroom mirror at the motel, I knew then that he wasn't attached to my apartment. The haunting had nothing to do with my place at all. He was attached to me. Lying here, writing this, I can already hear his raspy, phlegm-filled breath from the corner of the room. It appears that, unlike in life, I may be his milady after all, unwilling or not. Well, OP, sounds to me like it's time to get a big bundle of sage and smudge yourself every moment of every day. This is not a situation that I was fully prepared for, although everyone involved in it acted exactly how I would expect them to. Of course the mother wouldn't be able to see that it's her own precious angel's fault for standing out there and freezing to death. OP would feel some amount of guilt. The police, they'd file the paperwork as they do, and life will move on. Except for OP, I guess life will move on just a little bit differently than how it was before. Quite an unfortunate situation, and you have my deepest sympathies. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, do all them things, share it around. We will be posting more regularly here. It's not all Neckbeard related. I got a couple of other series that I'm cooking up, so I hope you guys are looking forward to it. Thank you so much for your patience and sticking around during my long hiatuses, but I promise I will be back before you know it. Thank you, as always, for watching, my friends, and I will see you in the next one. Until then, bye-bye.